Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and today we're going to make history. Although we only have the half an hour with Carl Gallups, he's very busy as he just came back from a major prophecy tour. We want to get Carl back on in the next few weeks to discuss a lot of things that are converging. The revival in Israel is an end-time literally sign that you need to watch. The return of the red heifer, which is now they discover one per decade, we talked about in the first hour with Dr. Bob Thiel. The Shemitah year, which is coming up next year, the fact that we have the blood moons, all these things are converging to with the economic disaster, and Mr. Juncker from Europe literally pushing for a greater unified Europe in the midst of a disaster financially there. The smoldering war with Gaza was literally a 5-hour peace so they can allow humanitarian aid into Gaza after many people die. The deaths by ISA, which is this supported by America, a terrorist organization, by the Sunni Muslim apologist in the White House, otherwise known as the Abominator, it's mind-boggling that he's not been impeached. It's mind-boggling that the Republican Party hasn't impeached him, and the Democrats, who are trying to stay away from him. They want his money, but they don't even want a campaign. And then to look at the revival in Israel, supernaturally, of rabbinic Jews who, remember now in the Zohar and the rabbinic documents, they reviewed Jesus and have been for now almost 2 millennia as boiling in excrement. But now there's rabbis going back from some of the most revered rabbis that now accept Messiah HaMashiach as Yeshua Jesus, as the incarnation of God, and they know that Israel is surrounded by its enemies. It will not withstand a 200,000 rocket attack by Hezbollah, Iran, etc. It can't. It doesn't matter how many nuclear weapons, as they say, that you can go from 12 really deads to 11 really deads, but you're still really dead. And Israel, if they withstand a war with Hezbollah, with Syria, Iran, etc., the surrounding nations, they will be a wiped out nuclear wasteland. And there may be temporarily some people in underground shelter, but the 6 million Jews and 2 million other people living in the state of Israel will have been a distant memory. This is what's happening right now, and we know that the peace treaty precedes a false peace, a peace that sets up the abomination that desolates. But there has to be revival in Israel, because it says in the Bible that 1/3 of Jews in Israel that have been apostate will turn back and see the one they've pierced. It's right there in the Psalms. So to highlight us and give us the latest update, the rabbi who found Messiah, both book and DVD, produced the DVD by WorldNet Daily, an amazing book, and of course also a very good simple way of approaching and seeing, an understanding if you are saved, which I think I'll try to do a very simple prayer with people. But your book is really good too, the Magic Man in the Sky. That's a very nice book because it takes people from a simple walkthrough to understand exactly why we need to have a God, why there is a God, and why without a God we won't even exist. In fact, you can tell if you're just a scientific, let's say you're a supercomputer and you took all the data, you'd have to calculate that mankind had maximum 20 years left. That's it. We're done. Without God's intervention, mankind is finished on this planet.
Yeah. Well, Bill, thank you so much for having me on. I always enjoy being on your show, and not only do I have a blast being with you, but I learn a lot as well as you talk and express your views and understanding. So God bless you. Thanks. And thank you for your kind words about my 2 books, The Magic Man in the Sky and The Rabbi Who Found Messiah, the story of Yitzhak Kaduri. And yes, I'm going to talk about the book and the movie, The Rabbi Who Found Messiah, but as you know and I know, our hearts are pure on this, and I want your audience to know, we're not here to sell a book. I don't care if anybody listening buys the book. What we're talking about is that God has used this book and the movie, has gotten it into Israel. It's gone all over the world. It's gone all over the United States, and churches all over the United States are showing the movie about the book. But the fact is, the book and the movie have made it into Israel. They are being used by a ministry in Israel, 2 ministries actually, to get into the hands of Orthodox Jews. We now have documented video evidence and picture evidence and journalistic evidence of Orthodox Jews who have come to Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior as a result of the message of this book and the movie. We have film evidence of Orthodox Jews being saved at the Wailing Wall, in the Old City, in downtown Jerusalem, in Haifa, in Tel Aviv, in Bnei Barak, very Orthodox Orthodox city or town, all of these things. And here just recently, in fact, WorldNet Daily is supposed to be running a story the middle of this week of a video of one of those Orthodox Jews who was saved through this ministry and through this material in the book. He's being baptized in the Mediterranean Ocean, Mediterranean Sea, and baptized in the name of Jesus Christ, and just filled with the Spirit of God and praise on his lips when he comes up out of the water. It's so exciting. It'll bring tears to your eyes. So yeah, I mean, and there's story after story after story coming out of Israel through this ministry of many Jews, and I don't know how many numbers total. We've probably got 8 or 9 on video and film, but many others who do not want to be filmed for the fear of severe persecution. But not only that, but we have other Jews telling us that they know for a fact that there are many, and my understanding is thousands, perhaps, of Jews in Israel who believe that Yeshua is the Christ. But again, they are not speaking out publicly because they will be so severely persecuted. So there is, I know whether the Orthodox community likes it or not, there is a Jesus revival going on in Israel. And I think it's been going on for a while. I think my book and movie is a small part of it, but praise God for it. I think Jews like Yitzhak Kaduri, who had a vision that Jesus is Messiah. I think that some of those visions are happening. I think your old men are dreaming dreams, your young men are having visions, and sons and daughters are beginning to prophesy. By the way, the moons are turning to blood red, and so all of these things are converging, and now we've got all the nations of the Middle East aligning against Israel, and rockets pouring into Israel, and America's borders collapsing, and constitutional travesties. I think we're living in very prophetic days, Dr. Bill.
Yeah, I think that we're living basically, if you're just, let's put it this way, if we were just looking at it logically, we'd have to say that God is in this, that God is basically saying, pay attention, be a watchman. And basically, being a watchman, you give the glory to God. One of the ways that I try to, and this goes into your book about Magic Man in the Sky, and I've learned this lesson, some of the latest parts just recently. If you want to find out if somebody's saved, and I walk through even if people have been a Christian for 50, 60 years, as I ask them, I said, have you given all of your sins and your sicknesses and all your offenses, not only you've done to others, but to yourself or your own body, or the ones that people have done to you, have you given them to God? And they said, well, I don't know. I said, have you gone systematically and thought about it, all the way from the time you're a child or even before you were born, because of things, generational curses that have gone on, have you given those to God? And I said, if you do that, first, then the second thing, give the things that are of glory. Not only the things personally, the things that you've done that are good, things that people have done to you, the opportunities you've been given, all the great things you literally rejoice in right now, give those to God. And said, and what you'll notice is that God takes away the sins and sicknesses and all the offenses, both those you've done, and the unforgiveness, which you can't forgive. People think, well, I can forgive this person. No, you can't. You can't truly forgive someone unless it's a supernatural intervention by God. When people think they can, they think of it's, again, taking the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. They think that by their own willpower they can do something. And what they need to realize is we are always relying on God, whether it's inspiration or perspiration or just becoming an overcomer. And then the same thing is going to happen to Israel. Israel is now going to have to become overcomers. And what's really happening is they're being compressed into this thing where logically, and Jews are very logical, of all types. That's why they make great scientists and geopoliticians and bankers, etc. They're very logical. They have a very high striving for education in the Jewish culture. But even when they become apostate, they realize now they're in a pickle. And the ones that are really, really logical and spiritual are now reaching out, and they're getting the message that Yeshua, Jesus, is here and coming soon. That's what's amazing. And that's the conclusion. When we come back, we'll hear more from Carl Gallups, and we'll have him back soon. CarlGallups.com is the website. Stay tuned. Back, and Carl, after that little kind of talk about, getting real with God, I don't think people are in Israel are in their pressure cooker. They're starting to get real with God now, too. I don't think people around the world, most of them are kind of like they're being an ostrich, but ostriches bury their head in the sand, but the very sensitive part of their body, their butt's in the air. And I have a feeling that most of our population really, here in America, for example, doesn't think bad things will happen, like plagues, EMP weapons, major natural disasters. I mean, every time we do something bad to Israel, and by the way, we're not talking about Israel as being a wonderful state. It's basically apostate right now. But there are Messianic Jews that are coming from Russia. They're not necessarily even blood ancient Hebrews, but they're turning to Messiah. And I remember one story when I went to Dizengoff Circle back in 1999 to visit the Messianic Jewish Fellowship there. As one of the things I did was going along with the Prophecy Club to speak in Israel, and he told me about a neurosurgeon in Russia that converted to become a Messianic believer, and he lost all his benefits in Israel. There's a lot of persecution of Christians, at least back then. I'm sure it is now, even though they're gaining help because they realize, just like Avi Lipkin, whose book I delivered to his wife in 1999, Christian Revival for Israel's Survival. And, of course, Avi's traveling around the country usually 3-4 months at a time, and then he goes back to Israel for a month or so. His wife is an intelligence agent and speaks Arabic. She used to live in Cairo for the Israeli government, and he has some pretty good insights, although some of them things I don't quite agree with. Like, I don't think they have to have necessarily the destruction of the Kaaba and Islam in order for them to build a temple. They don't even need to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, because we know that it's going to be cut off in the middle of the tribulation. But I think that we have to realize that God's hand is in all this, that we have to start realizing that we're only going to become overcomers when we hand it over to God. And I think when we wrote this book, and you just handed it back to God, you did that. You basically said, God, okay, I'm going to be obedient. I'll just do this book, and it's now in your hands.
Yes.
Where's it going right now? What's happening in Israel? And because I think that we're months and years, not decades, away from the tribulation. The first Shemitah year ends on Sukkot. The first day of Sukkot after the Shemitah year is September 28th, 2015, which by rabbinic law is the only first day in the next 7 years before you get to 2022 that you can actually start the sanctification of a Temple Mount. That's the only day. There's actually a specific day by rabbinic law that's been counted since the 3rd century, where they rechanged their calendar back to the ancient Hebrew calendar. So, by Mark Biltz and other experts on the calendars, we're really close to the time of Jacob's trouble. I mean, things are going to get nuts real soon.
Yeah. Well, I have never been a date setter, and I'm not. I know you're not.
Well, I'm not a date setter. I'm just telling you. I don't know. I don't know
if that makes any difference.
I don't want to set dates. I'm not setting dates. But what I'm saying is, when we start finding these constraints, you say, well,
yes,
2015, 2022. In other words, we're seeing convergence of war, pestilence. It's like Jesus said in Matthew 24, earthquakes in diverse places. I mean, we had them all over the place. Now, Fukushima hit was one last week. Alaska the week before. We see pestilences everywhere. Ebola is spreading like wildfire across Africa. H7N9, H5N1, swine flu with these Mexican kids coming up, multi-drug resistant TB, chikungunya now not only in Florida, but now also with the Aedes aegypti mosquito, now converting to other mosquitoes in Central and South America. Just last year, boom, now it's in Georgia. I mean, people need to start paying attention that if you look at every sphere, from financial to geopolitical to environmental, everything Jesus said through Matthew 24 and through the book of Revelation to John the Revelator, it's all happening. Every major and minor prophet of the Old Testament, it's all screaming at us to pay attention.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. In fact, this is going to sound like a cheap advertisement, but I've just written, and it's under publication and contract now with WND Books. It's coming out in February, a book about that very thing, the biblical warnings of Revelation that are unfolding before our eyes right now. And I know that people have their favorite eschatological views and interpretations and timing events and charts and calendars and graphs, but I'm telling you, and you know this, Dr. Bill, there are things that are in the book of Revelation that come right out of today's headline news. We're living in these prophetic biblical end times. We're living in it right now.
Right. In fact, you don't have to speculate a lot. All you have to do, and we're not setting dates, but we're saying pay attention, be a watchman, and understand that if you don't hand things over to God, you won't realize when, for example, the dollar becomes devalued by 60 or 70%. It happened in the Second World War, and they did it sneaky. What they did is they bought up the gold at $22.41, and then a week later, the president revalued the gold at $35 an ounce, so all of a sudden your currency was worth 60% less.
Right. Right.
I mean, that could easily happen.
And so much of what we're seeing happening, I believe, and I know you do, we've talked about this off air. I can't remember, you and I have talked so much, I can't remember what we've said on air or off air, but so this stuff's being done on purpose. Our borders are being opened on purpose. A nation with no borders is no nation at all. And Obama is fundamentally reshaping and rechanging this nation, just like he said. I think he's got other plans in mind. I think he's got what do you call it when you can well, I can't remember the word right now. It's on the tip of my tongue. Martial law. I think he's got martial law in mind. I think he has some other diabolical plans in mind. And plus, I believe there's a real spiritual war going on. This is very deeply spiritual. I know you believe that as well.
Well, what's happening is the Transpacific Partnership has been basically, in a sense, finalized. Of course, the Transpacific Partnership, the agreement with Europe, which is the European-American agreement, trade agreement, that is basically behind the scenes going on. What it does is makes our government, Congress and Senate, vestigial, which means it's like an appendix. It doesn't really matter if you have one, because you're not eating raw meat like caveman. The fact is that our government has a president that doesn't even rule by law. He rules by rulemaking and by just making phone calls. He said, I got a pen and I got a phone. And guess what? He doesn't talk about writing laws with that pen. He talks about writing memos to his buddies. You know, whether banker buddies or people in various bureaucratic departments, or even, you say, taking orders from the United Nations. It's time to smack Libya and do acts of war which are should get you impeached. Supplying weapons like 74 Stinger missiles to ISIS. Now, this is what happened in Benghazi. Benghazi was a transshipment point for advanced surface-to-air missiles and other advanced weapons to Islamic terrorists. And we know even these groups. We know that they're specific groups of terrorists that are the worst of the worst. And yet our government supports them because, just like I have reports that, for example, there's Guatemalan native males that have been killed by CIA operatives as part of the operation to start this disaster in Central and South America. And there's advertisements on all the radio and TV stations in Nicaragua, Guatemala, to tell you if you go to America, they're not going to reject you. I mean, we know it's not a massive increase in crime that all of a sudden happened, where it goes from 5,000 a year to 300,000 plus, and it's a never-ending disaster. And it's not surprising now, if you kill the Native American males, you're going to get the mamas take their babies and try to run as fast as they can. And of course, some of these people that are bringing these poor people across the border are making $50,000 a week, and they're going on death trains. So Obama gave a 72-hour with the Mexicans agreement that they could get into the country on death trains, and that's why babies are washing up on the Rio Grande River, because they died on the way. And Obama and his buddies are responsible. Rather than sending air-conditioned buses, if it's true refugees, they're letting these little babies die.
Right. And let me say to your audience, it's time to get right with Jesus Christ, our only hope.
It is indeed. Back to the Nutrimedical report. And I want to go over some of the other news items we have today. Some of the natural news ones you're going to find today, because I'm posting up a lot of, almost like a newsletter daily on the website. You'll find all the information about firegel.com and how to, there. I have an article that's really interesting. It talks about peeking into the perils of the wound, the ultrasound risks. And of course, we know that ultrasound has been used for years. I was trained in ultrasound in medical school back in the 70s under Dr. McMillan when I was in my medical school. So I actually was trained in ultrasound before pretty well any of the doctors in North America were actually using ultrasound. We know that the ultrasound energies are pretty low. And I think the risk-benefit ratio is that it's worthwhile doing it, but not overdoing it, just like anything. Obstetrical ultrasound, for example, deserves urgent reassessment. Some people are exposing the pregnant mice 14.5 days of gestation, the neurologically vulnerable window to 30 minutes of fetal ultrasound, and ascending the pups. And it's apparently they assessed the pups' behavior at 3 weeks of age, and they found there were significantly less interest in social interactions, had significant levels of behavioral hyperactivity in the presence of an unfamiliar mouse. So what they're seeing is behavioral and other changes. So what they found is that the 67% of women had at least one ultrasound in 2001, and by 2009 that percentage jumped to 99.8% with an average of 3 per woman. So it depends on the time of organogenesis. We have to start looking at energy, just like the energy exposed to cell phone exposure to pregnant women. Remember now, the fetus is 10 million to a billion times more sensitive to any form of toxins: fluoride, genetically modified foods, radiotoxins like cesium-137, radioiodine, the organ plate for the various organ tissues, the ectoderm, neuroectoderm, the neural tube, the mesoderm, and other organ systems have to develop in the initial plate before even the heart forms. And if there's disturbances in that, organogenesis isn't necessarily correct, or that there's changes in enzyme induction that may persist even into the fetus or the child or later in life. So they're raising questions just like the use of other types of radiation. Next article is one that we have 6 bodily tissues that can be regenerated through nutrition. And, of course, we have many of these in the very highest form in our Nutrimeds. And one of the ones, for example, for nerve regeneration is things like curcumin, which we have, of course. It's very important for blocking heavy metals, for regenerating neurological tissue. The first one is curcumin, which is in our cell defense and Regenerex. Then we talk about antioxidants like blueberry, which is present in our Vision Max. We talk about huperzine, which is similar to our vinpocetine. It's also present, for example, in our Cognition Plus and in our Brain Power. We look at natto, which is a nattokinase for reducing blood viscosity and C-reactive protein, Pi1. We look at royal jelly. We have the royal jelly, which is the fatty acid, the super factor, which is a form of what's called pantothene, converted to B5. We have theanine, which is present in Calm Mind. We have coffee, which actually we have various coffee and green coffee that's present in Ageless Energize. So when you look at all kinds of brain activity, we know the research on coffee has shown it actually reduces Alzheimer's disease. We look at the liver, we look at things like curcumin again, ginseng, vitamin E, especially all the different tocopherols to stop peroxynitrate radical. We're talking about beta cell regeneration in the pancreas. We're looking at things like Gamina sylvestre, which is in our dibetaline, vitamin D, curcumin again, arginine, which is supernox, berberine, which is, of course, our berberstatin. It not only releases the beta cell activation of production of insulin, but also the hormones in the small bowel, the jejunum and the delta cells, to produce proteolin, which is a hormone that converts T4 to T3. So really interesting. By the way, one of the other ones that helps the pancreas is stevia. So I tell people, if you're going to use an artificial sweetener, use stevia. Avoid sugar like the plague. Look at labels for stevia, for sugar. I like the glycemic load app that's available called Low GI on your iPhone. And try to avoid sugars. But that doesn't mean avoiding something like Ezekiel bread, because when you have a sprouted bread, which is the only ones to have if you have any bread, and you got to make sure you're not gluten sensitive, but you're not gluten sensitive and you've had testing done. Always get sprouted bread because it doesn't have phytates to bind to minerals. And you'll see the sprouted Ezekiel type breads have no sugars. It's just carbohydrate, but it's super high fiber, so the glycemic index is incredibly low. And you need that fiber to detox, because if you get constipated, you remobilize toxins in your lower bowel with bowel bacteria. Cardiac regeneration, resveratrol, of course, which is, we have the dimethyl resveratrol. That's present in anti-age max. We have the red wine extract, and of course that's also in wine extract is very helpful. The N-acetylcysteine, which we even have better, we have the selenium cruciferate, which is developed at Johns Hopkins University, cell detox glutathione, and of course the things to increase energetics in the heart, which includes CoQ10 ubiquinol. We have the only non-crystallizing CoQ10 in the world, which has a special CLA and other components to prevent crystallization. And we have, of course, the special form of carnitine called propionyl L-carnitine, which is the best form of carnitine for the heart muscle, as well as the mitochondrial catalyst, mitocarnitine, and ALC-1000 D-ribose. D-ribose is also very important for heart muscle. So, again, a whole series of nutraceuticals. You'll see a lot of information there. Then, of course, I have some information on the health news dealing with the CDC promises to fix the lack of safety standards in federal labs. Gives you an idea how slack they are, because they've discovered that they had all kinds of smallpox, and they had all kinds of other viruses present, like poliovirus, that were not properly housed and taken care of over a period of time. Then we talked about world news, and of course I want you to have a look at some of these world news articles. Israel agrees to a 5-hour cease to allow humanitarian aid. Obama widens sanctions against Russia, of course targeting a series of large banks and energy and defense firms. This economic warfare is really going to start heating up. Bashar al-Assad was sworn in as president now basically by a landslide for his third term. He's not going anywhere. In fact, he even had kind of a move that we see only in people that are victors, to allow his other side to actually have a time to, leave the country and get help and etc. So the so-called Qatari and Saudi Arabian surge to kind of throw over the regime of Bashar al-Assad isn't going anywhere, backed by Iran and Russia. And by the way, the statements we heard a few weeks ago that somehow Iran was going to abandon their ally Syria is just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. In fact, if anything, it's not going to strengthen with Mr. Maliki, who's Shiite, and with the other Shiite, the Alawite President Bashar al-Assad, and the Shiites in Iran, which are also tied directly to the Shiites in these other areas. And by the way, most of the Muslims in the so-called republics that make up to 40%, soon hitting 50% of the Russian army, they're primarily Shiite. They're not Sunni. The Sunnis are primarily in the south and Saudi Arabia and these other countries, but the majority of the Muslims that are in the north, like Azerbaijan, Tajikistan, etc., the majority are Shiite. Yes, there are some Sunnis, but they actually will collaborate with Christians, such as the Sunnis that collaborate with the Kurds that have taken most of the areas of Kirkuk, etc., and the oil in the north during this so-called division or balkanization of the country. New reports, too. Israel to pause bombing on Thursday. U.S. drone PAF jet kills 53 terrorists in a day. How do they know they're terrorists? They could be a wedding party. But, they have a second strike offensive policy, and they could be sitting in a bunker in Atlanta. And when they blow up these people, and they might get, quote, 2 people that they are on a watch list, they're pretty sure they're terrorists. They don't know what they're going to do, although they're intercepting communications. But they might kill 200 or 300 or 400 other people. They always have a second strike to make sure if the ambulances come in, they blow up the ambulance drivers and the other people trying to rescue people that are bleeding to death or have their limbs blown off. Not a good way to have a social policy to ever negotiate in the future with a country. So, want to hear your comments on these and other things. Want to also then talk about some of our latest nutraceutical, we call amazing kind of healing things that happen when people consult us. I had a gentleman this morning that wanted to know what to do for his back after a bad strain, and tell him, first thing is get yourself Inflamex and Cell Defense. Take Tendon Mender and Joint Performance, Collagen Max, Mount Red Velvet, and get a Lumen Photon. Put it on setting 7 for pain, setting Nico for regeneration, and don't take non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs or narcotic pain pills or fentanyl lozenges. We call them lollipops. Or, this is a good idea. Treat it naturally, heal the body, the pain turns off because the cause has gone away. Welcome back, and we get lots of interesting questions every day with people wanting to know what's going on with their bodies. Why are they having specific health problems? What's happening and how do they respond to different research? In fact, I just pulled up an article that was actually new evidence fuels concerns over safety of niacin. It wasn't niacin. It's niacin plus a drug, and laropipirant. And the fact is that natural molecules work with the body, and niacin, our neovascular example, will raise high-density lipoprotein cholesterol, which is a good cholesterol, lower the VLDL3, decrease vascular events. When we use things like, for example, the gamma E+, which includes all the gamma tocopherols and all the other tocopherols and tocotrienols, they significantly protect ion channels. We know that research has shown that many drugs basically are off limits altogether. Calcium channel blockers cause decrease in IQ and brain, actual shrinkage, that they have all kinds of other side effects. Beta blockers will cause balding, a decrease in heart muscle strength. We know that many other problems are developed because beta blockers will affect memory and increasing problems with dementia. There are natural things that you can combine. There are some drugs that are actually helpful. One drug, for example, metformin, that is. Metoprolol is very bad, but metformin, actually, even in non-diabetics, will actually extend life because it decreases liver production of excessive sugar. And so even in non-diabetics that have elevated blood sugar or insulin, it helps dramatically extend life. So we know that some drugs are okay. Diuretics are okay if you're monitoring electrolytes. But you have to be careful of maintaining magnesium and potassium especially. And you also have to make sure you're not on a diuretic that's going to drive potassium into a dangerous or hyperkalemic range. So it's a minefield out there. And there's a lot of different drugs that are basically off limits, or they should be used with great care. Other ones are basically quite helpful. For example, when I tell people about the use of mild diuretics, you can use those, or even stronger diuretics. They're quite helpful. Things like ACE receptor blockers, as long as you're monitoring things, or ACE inhibitors. The main thing is that some people will get side effects from them, and you have to make certain that you can transition to natural ACE inhibitors, which include many of our nutraceuticals like our Cardivite, hawthorn berry, Supernox, and other things that will help reduce the ACE converting enzyme activity. So, it's what you have to do is you have to do a little bit more work if you're going to actually do natural therapies, but it's far superior to reduce the amount of drugs or completely eliminate it, and it makes a really big difference. So that's an interesting article. We have also lots of interesting requests that people have when they send me their QRMA tests. And what I do is I go down systematically, and I've decided now to start doing what's called a core 4 and then level 4. So we have a gentleman that had a core 4 we were looking at his heart and other things. We'll be giving him Cardivite and Supernox, lumbrokinase, because we have significant concern over vascular events, and CoQ10 Supreme. That's his core 4, CoQ10 Supreme ubiquinol. It builds up the reserve of ubiquinol, which is converted in the body to ubiquinone. It's far better absorbed than ubiquinone, which is the regular CoQ10. But the regular CoQ10 that's available out in the marketplace is crystallizing, so it doesn't get absorbed. We have the only non-crystallizing CoQ10, so it's 8 times more absorbed than any other gel form. Then, of course, level 2 involves protecting his heart, where he's going to need gamma E+, full vitamin K2 that will prevent calcification of his arteries. It obviously shows signs in his testing, QRMA, and his history of borderline thyroid function, so he needs mitothyroid and Nutridyne. To reverse his tendency toward diabetes, berberstatin. Everybody for cytoprotection of organs is going to need magnesium, so we recommend the triple threat of magnesium taurate for heart, magnesium glycinate, the most biotolerated form that goes directly to the mitochondria as well, and magnesium potassium citrate that will raise potassium and magnesium levels and prevent kidney and gallbladder stones, which often happens. You need to correct the minerals, Vitamin Mineral Max and Minerals Plus, because he's going to need chelating agents as well. Virtually everybody with heart disease has got free iron and heavy metals. And, of course, he'll need omega fatty acids, omega supreme krill, and omega cod liver liquid. Neovasc, which we mentioned before, is a long-acting niacinamide, and our flush rate's 15%, but if you take a high-dose Power C, just one or two capsules twice a day, you won't have flushing spells with the Neovasc. CoQ10 Supreme, I tell people bite one, hold it under the tongue 3 to 4 times a day. If you have significant hypertension or heart disease or congestive heart failure. This gentleman also had problems with digestion, so he's going to need Digestes and Gastrozyme. We often find dysbiosis associated with people with all kinds of health problems, including heart disease. And, of course, if you show elevations of urobilinogen, which is one of the bile pigments, it means your bile bacteria are deconjugating and re-releasing toxins back into your system. So he'll need to take colon cleanse. A lot of time when we look at people that have signs of depression, decreased energy, or they've got decreased methylation pathways, we give them BioLVR, superfolate, and power methyl B12. And to protect the kidneys and the person who's pre or diabetic, Vein Away, which is diosmin, and carnosine. To protect the brain, Cognition Plus and Brain Power, and of course anti-inflammatory, Inflamex, because of some chronic pain and joint problems. Need to protect your eyes, Vision Max and Can-C. And general antioxidant protection, Nutritrella, Cell Detox, Glutathione, and Selenium cruciferate. Because we're going to try to chelate out heavy metals, which also showed up in his QRMA test, we will need to give him a dosage of Keeler Max, and he'll need 4 capsules twice a day, which is the average for a male. And ultra liquid zeolite, 13 drops in filtered water 3 times a day. That's level 2. If you get more advanced because of some other health problems, we could discuss those kind of things, but it gives you an idea how we approach it. Now, you don't need to take everything. I tell people, start off with core 4, then we can prioritize level 2, retest in a month, see how you're doing, retest, send the test on along with any history changes. Conventional tests we can recommend that you can do through your primary care doctor, or tests you can order yourself through labtestingdirect.com, McGuffey Labs, or Great Plains Lab, etc. There are also facilities and clinics, not only here in America, but Mexico, Europe, and elsewhere, Brazil, that can do specialized types of care. A lot of time the restraint here in America is because the system is controlled by insurance carriers, by doctors that are trained at medical schools that are primarily drug-oriented, and they don't have enough basic training in pathology, internal metabolism, or environmental medicine that really understand the polytoxicity of drugs and how they deplete minerals or vitamins or block enzymes and cause new health problems. They're often listed, though, in the medical legal journals or in the actual commercials on television and radio that tell you how toxic they are. So it gives you an idea that our system is purposefully keeping doctors on a short chain. Let's put it that way. That would be good. When we're trying to detoxify people from mercury, one of the things I tell people is start on your detox with Keeler Max and take your liquid zeolite, ultra-liquid zeolite first. Protection again with things like cell detox glutathione, selenium cruciferate, and Nutritrel and Regeneration right away. And then would only remove 1 amalgam per month and replace it with porcelain only. Don't use the material that's hardened by ultraviolet light that's basically going to release 2,000 parts per million of fluoride salts into your body, because that's how these are hardened. They're a fluoride salt chemical, and they're an exothermic reaction. So you don't want that to be done, to harden that tooth with ultraviolet light and release a lot of fluoride into your body. It's a big problem, and it's a problem where you expose it even to the specialists, and they try to pretend and futz away and say, no, that's not a problem. And you ask tough questions, and you can corner them pretty quickly. So I do it with my dentists and surgeons and so on. I do it with other people when they call and consult me. And I said, this is the questions you ask. And when you ask those questions, it gets pretty iffy. You realize that the doctors either are partially ignorant or completely ignorant, or they ignore the data because they want to proceed and do the same thing their colleagues do. So that's a big problem. We have, let's see now, we have well, it's amazing how many requests we have. One of the things you have to do if you're going to have lumen photon work is you've got to make sure your mineral content, especially copper, zinc, are working in your immune system. We found out, for example, that the stem cell clinics, if you don't have proper probiotic bacteria in your gut, stem cell transplants don't work. So you need living probiotic, which is a Roselle 6 strain, and every third or fourth day, living probiotic ultra. So if you're trying to rebuild your heart, your brain, your whatever tissue, you have to have probiotic gut bacteria, because they generate molecules that go into your central circulation, affect every organ in your body. It's one big orchestra. It's not one thing. And there's no such thing as a miracle cure, but there is amazing healing through natural means without side effects. More powerful than drugs and more complete. And when the pain goes away, it's because the problem goes away. If you have questions on anything, drop us a call or an email or order line or call line 888-212-8871. Nutrimedical.com, NUTRImedical.com. Soon we'll be posting up a lot of new information on clayandIron.com, the spiritual site and news site for Nutrimedical. And I want to thank you out there for your support, for your listening, and for passing on the truth and just asking better questions. That's our main tagline. Be back tomorrow on Thursday. Another remarkable show and update with Tim Alexander and Chris Harris, our nuclear expert.